G5 Jeff TV, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Please share this video, support your boy. Support good content at all times. Let's get right down to business. I haven't heard anyone really talk about this in detail, but of course on G5 Jeff TV, this is what we do. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. Now, the WBC, they're an organization that has the most prestigious belt, the green belt. But the WBC as an organization, I would like to say, is not consistent with their rules, let alone enforcing their rules. A lot of decisions that they make is questionable. I don't think the WBC can be trusted. In the WBC's rule book, it strictly says that they're able, the president and the board is able to change and amend any rules that they have in their rule book if it benefits the sport of boxing, which means they can do whatever the hell they want whenever the hell they feel like it. And I always say, if a fighter or a manager or a promotional company instills trust and faith in the WBC, it is their fault, not the WBC. It's equivalent to if you know someone is a thief, if you allow that person in your house and they steal something from out of your house, it's not their fault that they stole something. It's your fault for letting their ass in to begin with. It's similar to that in terms of the WBC. But in this particular situation, the WBC is treating two of their champions completely different. And I'm just going to put the facts out there, and then I want for you guys to tell me why they're doing it. Okay? The WBC has two newly crowned champions. At middleweight, 160 pounds, Canelo Alvarez. He just beat Gennady Golovkin. A lot of people don't think so, but the three judges that night said Canelo Alvarez won. Also, the WBC has a new welterweight champion, 147 pounds, Showtime Shawn Porter. Okay? He just beat Danny Garcia for the WBC title that was dropped by Keith one-time Thurman due to injuries and inactivity. Okay? So, under the WBC rules, both champions should be treated the same, unless they have to change the rules to benefit the sport of boxing. So I'm going to put both scenarios out there, and then I'm going to leave it up to you guys. The WBC just had their convention where they will mention a bunch of title eliminators. They'll mandate fights, things of that nature. Basically, the schedule for the WBC, things that they would like to happen under their sanctioning body. Now, Canelo Alvarez, newly crowned champion, was granted a voluntary defense. And then he can fight his mandatory afterwards. He doesn't have to fight his mandatory immediately, which is Jermall Charlo. So, Canelo Alvarez has taken that opportunity to fight Rocky Fielding December 15, 2018, New York City, Madison Square Garden, to fight for a 168-pound championship under another sanctioning body. And the WBC is perfectly okay with it. Okay? Now, in my eyes, that is treating Canelo Alvarez very well. For anyone that's been living under a rock, you should know that Canelo Alvarez and the WBC had a rocky relationship. The WBC basically forced Canelo Alvarez to give up the belt before because they wanted for Canelo Alvarez to negotiate a deal with Gennady Golovkin back in the day under a certain time frame. And Canelo Alvarez, Oscar De La Hoya, and Golden Boy basically stated that they didn't want to negotiate it at that time. And they ended up dropping the WBC belt. Canelo Alvarez wasn't happy about that. Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy, wasn't happy about that. And they went on a campaign where it was just like, fuck the WBC. We're not fighting for any of your belts. You're not getting any of this money. None of that. That was their history. And the WBC tried everything to get back into Canelo's good graces. Canelo had to fight with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. They made a belt. They made a belt. Specifically for that fight, they made a belt. And Canelo Alvarez said, no disrespect to the people that made this belt, but I don't want to fight for the WBC's belt. When Canelo was getting ready to fight Triple G the first time, he said, I'll fight Triple G, but I don't want to fight for the WBC belt. So there was a lot of animosity from Canelo Alvarez when it came down to the WBC. Put the WBC in a bad light, but in the same sense, the WBC put Canelo in a bad light as well. So it seems like as a goodwill gesture, the WBC has granted Canelo Alvarez a voluntary, except for facing his mandatory immediately. It sounds like it's a goodwill gesture, and it's not for the good of boxing. Okay? So that's Canelo Alvarez and his situation with the WBC. Now let's flip it to Showtime Shawn Porter. Showtime Shawn Porter, newly crowned champion. He just defeated Danny Garcia for the vacant belt. And the WBC, after the convention, said that Shawn Porter has two, not one, but two mandatories. Shawn Porter was not granted a voluntary. He was not granted a voluntary. Now, let me give you a history between Shawn Porter and the WBC. WBC is the green belt, the most prestigious belt out there to the boxers. Shawn Porter's father and manager, Kenny Porter, made it perfectly clear they didn't want to fight for the IBF belt because the IBF dropped Shawn Porter from out of the rankings after he lost the IBF belt in his first title defense against Kell Brook. They made that perfectly clear. Kenny Porter also made it clear that they made payments, sent a lot of money over to the WBC to make sure that they were in the rankings for the WBC, a lot of sanctioning fees and things of that nature. Okay? So they put their money where their mouth was. It came down to the WBC. Also, Kenny Porter, Shawn Porter, they didn't fight not one title eliminator, but they fought two title eliminators. Two. They fought Adrian Granados as the first title eliminator. Then they came back and they gave Shawn Porter a second title eliminator against Andre Berto. He won both of them. And still the WBC made Danny Garcia and Brandon Rios a title eliminator for the #1 spot. So Andre Berto fought two title eliminators to get the #1 spot, and then the WBC turned around, stabbed him in the back, and made Danny Garcia and Brandon Rios for the #1 spot with the WBC. So Danny Garcia beat Brandon Rios, and he was #1, and Shawn Porter ended up being #2 after all of that. And the only reason it worked out in Shawn Porter's favor is because Keith Thurman was inactive, and he ended up dropping the title. That's the only reason Shawn Porter got an opportunity to fight for the vacant WBC belt, because Keith Thurman dropped it. Now, with you guys knowing all of the facts now, I think it's safe to say that the WBC didn't do Shawn Porter and Kenny Porter any favors before he won the title and now after he won the title. So let's compare the two. You have Canelo Alvarez, newly crowned champion. He didn't want to negotiate with Gennady Golovkin back in the day, so he was forced to give up the title. Canelo Alvarez has been popped for drugs, 2 different tests, and said it was quote-unquote contaminated meat. WBC turns around and they defended him. Turned around and defended him. And after he wins the title against Triple G, they give him a voluntary. They don't even put his feet to the fire and make him fight as mandatory versus Jamal Charlo. Favorable treatment. Shawn Porter. The WBC makes Shawn Porter fight 2 title eliminators. Adrian Granados and Andre Berto. Then they stab him in the back and make him the number 2 contender and make Danny Garcia the number 1 contender. And all Danny Garcia had to do was beat Brandon Rios. And then after Shawn Porter wins the vacant WBC title, they turn around and they tell him he got to fight 2 mandatories. And one of them is against a guy that he lost to. WBC is treating these 2 champions very different. Very different. The only question I have is, where does these 2 treatments in terms of these champions benefit boxing? And why is the WBC treating Canelo Alvarez so much better than Shawn Porter? Shawn Porter, he hasn't had a failed drug test. He hasn't had 2 failed drug tests. Shawn Porter isn't ducking anybody in terms of the WBC's eyes, in terms of the WBC rankings. Shawn Porter's never been forced to drop a WBC belt. Shawn Porter never said, fuck the WBC, I don't want to fight for your belt. But Canelo Alvarez has. But Canelo Alvarez is getting treated much better as a champion than Showtime Shawn Porter. I just put the facts out there. Y'all just tell me why that's the case. And then answer, why should the WBC be trusted when they're treating their champions completely different? And to cap it off, right? And to cap it off, Showtime Shawn Porter has his first mandatory, which is Keith Thurman. He's been inactive. He hasn't done anything to deserve a shot with Shawn Porter. That's number 1. Number 2, Andre Berto. Shawn Porter just beat him. He just beat him. TKO'd him. Stopped him. And Andre Berto has no reason being a mandatory, let alone the second mandatory. Like, he gets to fight the winner of the first fight. Like, he's the champion. And there's no legitimate reason why Andre Berto is the second mandatory. Because Andre Berto's fight with Devin Alexander was not a title eliminator. It was not a title eliminator. And he has not done anything in his career to prove that he deserves a mandatory title shot. In his last 10 fights, he's 5-5. And in his last fight against Devin Alexander, 8 out of 10 people think he lost that fight. And these are the 2 mandatories for Shawn Porter. And one more thing before I go. This mandatory is against Keith Thurman, so they are granting a unification fight because Keith Thurman is still the WBA champion. So the WBC is granting a unification fight. So if the WBC is allowing Canelo Alvarez to have a voluntary to go after another belt, why is Shawn Porter not granted a voluntary to go after another belt? Hey, maybe Shawn Porter wanted to go up to 154 and fight for a title. Maybe he wanted to fight Jermell Charlo for a title at 154. Or maybe Shawn Porter might have wanted to go over to the IBF and fight Errol Spence Jr. The treatment for Canelo Alvarez and the treatment for Shawn Porter is completely different and is not fair at the end of the day. I just want for you guys to tell me why it's happening. Why is it happening? And with that being said, why should the WBC be trusted going forward if they're treating their champions like they're treating Shawn Porter? Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section. G5 Jeff TV. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Please share this video. Support your boy. Support good content at all times. I appreciate y'all. Peace.